Being a first-time marketer is super hard because you have to do everything from the ground up, and becoming a VP and growing with the company is even harder. But I know a guy, his name is Kracov, and he figured out a way to actually grow with the company and learn marketing skills and become a leader eventually. And he helped his company from zero to hundreds of millions in revenue through just doing good marketing, which was marketing as a media business. And so I was super curious. I hope you enjoyed this episode and take some golden nuggets, especially around how to become a media company and grow with the community. So let's hop into it. Do you want to tell a little bit about yourself? How do you want to introduce yourself to people?
So I'm Alex. I'm the CEO of Doc today, but I'll kind of give you a little backstory on my career so far. So in college, I went to Tulane down in New Orleans. I became obsessed with internet businesses. And I really just wanted to learn, all right, how do you make money online? My parents were lawyers, so I had really not a lot of context in how you actually did that, but kind of quickly started lurking around the internet and actually ended up starting kind of my own marketing agency in college, which got me kind of sucked into social media and trying to figure out how that all worked. Got a job out of school working for Yelp, doing sales for about a year. But then my really formative kind of marketing internet experience was working for this agency called Blue State Digital. They were famous for kind of doing Barack Obama's campaigns. I didn't do that, but I got to learn from the people that did. So kind of got that hardcore ad agency experience, but a little bit with like this political twinge on it. That actually brought me out to California and Silicon Valley because Google was my big client, and I came out to SF to kind of set up the office and to work closer with Google. And then I kind of had a career crisis. I was like, I want to do more startups. I want to go kind of learn what it takes to build a really early stage company. I got into business school. I was like, do I go do that? But I got lucky because my roommate at the time was the first employee at a company called Lattice. And he had been friends with Jack and Eric from Teespring, and I kind of watched him join this company. And I was sitting on the couch and I kind of worked up the courage to ask him if I could actually get a shot at joining Lattice because they had a lot of marketing problems at the time. They were just getting started. And I was like, I can help with that. And long story short, I really hit it off with Jack and I joined Lattice as the third employee, first marketer, first real revenue person. And that's what I've been up to like the last 5-ish years until I quit recently last April to start my company, Doc.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting story. Do you think like startups right now would give a beginner like you in 2021 the same kind of responsibilities that you got? I think it's just you were lucky because I feel like as a first marketer, even if you know a little bit of marketing, it's so hard to actually, how do you say it? Like, it's so hard to actually get a VP level role, even if you have some marketing experience. And one thing that I can tell you from my experience is that I was not able to outgrow myself as a VP. That taught me I'm a great IC, but not a great VP. And how did you keep your pace with the $1 billion valuation company so fast? Like, what did you keep doing?
So I think there was like an interesting thing early on where Jack, who's the CEO of Lattice, really hired me, I think in his head as like a marketing manager. And I was like, this guy seems smart enough. He's friends with Wes. How bad could he be? And like, I pitched him and I had a whole deck and, I had some ideas that I came to him with, but he really hired me as a marketing manager in his head. Although in my head, I was like, I am the head of marketing. I am running marketing forever at this company. And so I had this like mentality where I am going to grow at this company. This is my shot. And so what was interesting with Lattice is I was really able to grow at the pace that the business grew. And so if Lattice was a screaming success overnight, like in the first 6 months that I joined, there's no shot that I would have been able to kind of grow into a VP that quickly, right? Because I had no experience with SaaS. I didn't know what an MQL was, let alone like how do you manage a team of like 20 different marketers? Like I had no idea how to do that. But I was fortunate enough that kind of Lattice grew at a pace that matched my own growth. And I had enough experience working at kind of like, I call them like real companies, like working a little bit with Google and the Blue State Digital experience, that I kind of knew what actually scale looked like in a way that some other people at Lattice didn't, who were really just like true startup people who kind of only saw what a really beginning startup looked like. And so that kind of allowed me to pace my growth as the company grew. And I can get into kind of some of the tactics and things that I did to really help myself. But that's kind of how I thought about it, is I was fortunate enough that I kind of grew at the pace of the company.
Okay. One quick thing, like there are a lot of people who are currently at disadvantage, and my audience is not from SF usually. Like, so they're like at disadvantage of not being in the hot scene. And if they have to get into the role like you did in, I think 7-8 years ago, what would you advise them to get? Like, what would be your indicator to find, okay, go work with, like, if I were to start somewhere outside of SF or even US, how would you get a job like that?
Definitely. So I was an outsider too, right? I grew up in Maryland. I was from DC. Most of my friends didn't work in tech. Like, it was a pretty foreign concept for most of the people in my friend group in my life. I think what I did, and if you kind of reverse engineer my path, is I first started developing skills that would be useful at a startup. And so I think there's too many people who are just like, I want to go work at a startup, but they don't necessarily know what function or what type of startup or what thing they actually want to do. And so for me, it was like, all right, should I try sales? And then I was like, actually, marketing is a better fit for me. And then I spent 5-6 years really building marketing skills and understanding how to do that. So when the time to go join a startup came, I actually had something that gave value to that company, right? I think the other thing was putting myself in a position to get lucky. And so, I moved out to San Francisco, and this is probably a little less relevant today in the remote context, but I put myself in a city, in a place where I'd be surrounded by people to potentially bump into an opportunity. And that's exactly what happened. Like, I actually deferred business school for a year. So I was like, let's see what happens. I might run into a startup, and that's what I wanted to do. So today, I think my advice is, especially in the remote context, is to put yourself in position to get lucky online. And that can happen in a variety of different contexts and communities, whether that's being super active in a Discord, if you're into the crypto thing, or actually just writing and putting your ideas out there online, like this podcast or blogging or things like that. That will help you get lucky. And so, yeah, it's a combination of skill building and kind of putting yourself in that right position.
Got it. Good advice, actually. So build skills, and then later on, like, try to do stuff which basically build in public so people can see your work, and from there onwards, like, find something. Okay, cool. Let's get into your story. I'm really interested in how you build Lattice, because I was in San Francisco in 2020, and I saw, like, at every bus station there was Lattice out of home advertising, and I was super impressed. My co-founder at User Pilot was really impressed as well. So I'd just love to know, like, you build a media machine, and everybody throws this word around, instead of becoming a marketing company, become a media company. And I think you guys did it really well. So take us through the journey, like, how are you able to build a media company for HR people, which is very rare, by the way.
So I'll kind of take you through the story of building Lattice. So I would say I kind of think about it in terms of stages of the company growth. And so the first year where I was the only marketer at Lattice, it was really just a lot of experimentation. Right? Me figuring out, like, how does SaaS marketing work? And when I put in a certain input, what comes out the other side? And so, what happens when I run Facebook ads, when I run LinkedIn ads, when I run Capterra ads, when I run an event, when I do a webinar, right? There was just a lot of experimentation around different kind of like marketing campaigns and media types to try and figure out what worked. And I think what we slowly started to learn was that the content side of things and the classic inbound marketing, like tactics, was really where we were going to find kind of our overall growth. And then I started to come up with this philosophy that we really should build a media company for HR folks. And this has definitely become very in vogue today, but I think at the time it wasn't as like in the cultural zeitgeist, I guess, on Twitter. And we basically noticed that there was this shift happening in HR from kind of your old school HR person, think like Toby from The Office, to, your more modern HR person. And HR was really going to have a seat at the table, right? It became people strategy. It became really strategic to be able to hire and build cultures. And, there's HR leaders like Holloway at Reddit who really represented this trend. And so we saw this opportunity to really build a brand for this new type of our HR person. And, our thinking is, let's give everything away for free. We're going to create a ton of content and community and networking events and different things like that. It's all focused around education and kind of meeting each other. And we aligned it all under this brand called Resources for Humans, a fun play off human resources. And the thinking was we kind of build this brand with one advertiser, and that's Lattice. And so, media is kind of a slowly dying industry, if you will, because of the advertising model. But we thought if we could put the SaaS model on top of the kind of classic media side of things, it'd be really helpful. And we'd be able to really grow and kind of make that work. And the way we thought about building this media company was in terms of like franchises or programs. And so we would come up with kind of different programs, let's call them, around some things. So an example would be, we started the Resources for Humans podcast video series where Jack would sit down with different HR leaders, talk about it was nothing about Lattice. It was only about people strategy, the challenges with recruiting and culture building and things like that. That was one example. We started a huge Slack community. We did virtual events. And so we sort of stacked all these different programs on top of each other, and they all fed back into the same email list, and we all kind of cross-promoted them. And that over time really grew massively. It started with like a 200-person Slack community that grew into a 12,000-person Slack community. We started with doing webinars to like 100 people, and that eventually grew into, we were doing virtual conferences for 42,000 people. And so this idea of program building and really iterating on the scale of the programs was kind of how we built this like media company around HR folks.
The question there is, while you were building, and I remember in How to Win podcast where you said like you built a Slack group and people were really trying to get into the community itself without being your customer. What I want to know from you is that how are you able to build that community while building the media company as well? Because I have to be very honest with you, it's super hard to build a very engaging community because it's not you enable it, it's people enable it. So there must be other platforms, and there was a Slack group where all the HR people were hanging out. Like, what was the idea that stuck so well to the HR people that they said, okay, this is a community I want to hang out in?
I think this take on the modern HR person, there's a real shift happening in HR, and HR, especially at, small startups, is a somewhat lonely profession. You're maybe the only HR person at a company. And so there was an opportunity to connect all these HR operators with each other. And I think they were really willing and excited to kind of be a part of that world. I think the other thing is there was a really separation between church and state, between the Resources for Humans community and like our sales team. Right. And so there was no Lattice advertising happening in that community. Our sales team would try and get in. I would block them. Like, there was no chance of anybody getting in there trying to do anything salesy at all. And that really kept the community special and in a place where people could really have these kind of authentic conversations with each other. And I think you kind of mentioned it, is this was really just a broader HR community. It was not a Lattice user community. We didn't have a Lattice channel. We didn't have anything like that. I didn't care whether we used a competitor or not. But what that did was just build brand love for us in the market. And it was funny, like there's conversations that would happen in there where it's like, should we choose Lattice or Reflective or Lattice and Culture Amp? And you kind of just let the community, answer those questions for each other, as opposed to Lattice always jumping in. Now, I think like this was also happening in a time where Slack communities were somewhat novel. Like today, I don't know if I would start a Slack community because there's so many Slack communities. People are so overwhelmed with them. There's only so much opportunity. So you really need to go where people aren't like thinking, where they aren't necessarily doing it today. And that's always like the hard part about being a marketer, is what worked in the past. Like with my new company, Doc, like I'm not going to build a Slack community because I feel like it's kind of just tired and people are too many of them. So you have to come up with new ways to kind of engage the broader community.
That's great. Back to the media company you built for HR people. I feel like marketers take this become a media company just too seriously, too early. I feel like Dave Gehart said it. I don't know if Drift copied from you or Profitwell copied from you, because like Profitwell started this media company in 2018, 17 somewhere. Drift started somewhere 2017 as well. Both were starting to say, hey, become a media company, become a media company. I don't know if they stole from you or not. That doesn't matter. What matters is that I feel like at the point of startups, but even if you have, let's say, seed round or Series A round, you yourself have raised the seed round, at least, right? And telling people to become a media company from day one is almost like you kill your resources, your time resources, pretty much. So somebody who's starting today or is part of seed or Series A business, how should they think about becoming a media company? Should you be on all channels? Should you write a blog? Should you write thought leadership content, promote it on the right channels? should you start a podcast and a YouTube business as well? And then, like there's so many things. I am myself one person media company who's like has a newsletter as well, has a podcast as well, trying to promote it on YouTube as well, trying to like write threads on Twitter as well. So like I'm doing a lot of things. And so just wanted to know, like, if somebody's starting today and wanting to build media company like Lattice did, how should they think about it?
Yeah. It's funny because the media company, it was for Lattice, it was never an external framing. We never said that in the market. We were never like, we're going to build a media company for HR people. It was really how I thought about it and in how I would kind of present our work to Jack and the rest of the exec team, right? It was like, we're doing all these separate marketing programs. The overarching kind of strategy is to build a media company, but it was never something we talked about or said. We would just do the programs. And so to answer your specific question on how to get started, you want to pick, especially if you're just a founder and a marketer, you want to pick one content format, right, that you are most comfortable with. And so that can be writing, that can be talking, that could be long form podcasts, that could be short form TikTok videos, right? You want to pick one format that feels like easy and potentially fun for you to go after. For Jack and Lattice, it was kind of a combination of these sit down interviews and then some kind of thought leadership blogging on the side. And it's really like pick one format and do it for a long period of time and build that repeatable audience. And that's kind of how I would get started today. And then as you sort of grow the team and you get traction and you kind of build that audience in one place, you can kind of push it into other directions. Like I think Pomp, the crypto guy, did this really well. Like he grew, I'm pretty sure it was like he just grew his Twitter audience. He made that really big and then branched out to YouTube and podcasting, right? And so once you have an audience in kind of one channel and one platform, it's a lot easier to expand in other places. And I think the other side of this coin is distribution, right? And so once you're creating this content, like how do you actually get it out there into the world? And it can be really slow to do it the organic way. It can be really slow to just sit there and put content out there and kind of hope it gets viral or hope it goes top of Hacker News. And you can do that and you should do all of that. But there are ways that you can kind of boost that, especially if you're a funded startup. And so, an easy answer there is promoted posts on social, right? And so, if you're a B2B audience, filming videos like this and promoting it onto your LinkedIn audience is a great way to kind of get out there, build your brand. And you're maybe not going to get a bunch of direct response and a bunch of leads back, but people are going to start associating your brand as kind of a more legit company, as a company that associates with these other people that you're interviewing. And so that's a really good way to kind of build that audience. And that's what we did early at Lattice. Like we would film these little videos with people promoted on social. People would start seeing Lattice associated with big companies like Reddit and Asana and places like that. And they weren't customers yet, but they eventually became customers, which is a funny result of everything.
Yeah. Which brings back to the attribution and the reporting side of it. When you're building a media company, the first 2 years actually is not something you will see the direct attribution of building a media company. People will tell you on the sales call, like, hey, you know what? Like I heard in the podcast, I was just thinking right now, I bought ProfitWell a couple of years ago and I started listing. I first heard ProfitWell in a podcast, in the SaaS podcast, Patrick Campbell. How can they just go and attribute the SaaS podcast to that buying? And I was a free customer for the entire year. And so it is very hard. I don't know how was it for you, but like it is very hard to convince execs to put resources where you will not get a lot of money back immediately, at least for the next 1 year or two. And you have to run this branding play. And for growth marketers, it's pretty hard to actually convince people because growth marketing is more about performance. Show us the result. How did it go? Right. And for folks who are listening right now, like how do you go and convince the exec to build a media company and be patient at the same time, where they have to raise the next round in like 18 months, right?
It is a challenge. And I think to some degree, it really, I forget who has the saying, but it's like marketers should only go work for CEOs who really believe and understand marketing, because I think it is true. And I was fortunate enough where Jack really like believed in it, believed in what we were doing and was a great partner along the way with it. That being said, I think there are things you can obviously do to try and convince. And I think it's maybe showing progress, like it might not be showing up kind of in the number of leads directly attributed to a podcast or a video or whatever the pieces of content that are out there. And there are ways to attribute that. We like bought Visible and we would kind of try and figure out roughly, right, how everything was influencing our leads and pipeline and stuff. But I think you feel it in the market when you're putting good content out there, when you are putting these videos and the blogs and things, you see your website traffic going up, people start texting you, people start talking to you, leads start coming in and kind of mentioning different things. And the hard part about B2B is too many people try and put this growth hack mindset on B2B where it's like, I'm just going to hack Google AdWords all the way to $1 billion in revenue or whatever. And like, that's just not how it works. That might work in consumer, or you can do Instagram ads. And it's like, yeah, because purchasing decisions for like a shoe or a piece of clothing or something like that, it's really simple. But B2B is about building trust out there in the world. And that is why like inbound marketing, media company, whatever you want to call it, is so important for B2B, because the journeys are not linear. It is all over the place. It's exactly as what you said. People listen to you on a podcast, download your ebook, see something on LinkedIn, and each of those moments kind of builds up your brand in their head. And then you just want them to think of you when they're about to search for your product. And that's what your goal is as a marketer, right? It is not necessarily converting them right away. It's like you want to be a part of that consideration set when they're going to go buy performance management or they're going to go buy marketing automation. And that's why the media company stuff is so helpful, because you're building trust, you're providing free value to people. And so they more often than not will think of you at least. And that's when your kind of primary job is over as a marketer, and then sales can convince them that the right product for you.
Got it. That's a good answer, actually. I hope I can just take that clip and send it to my next head of the company and say, hey, listen to this before coming to me.
One thing,
cool. Go ahead.
Do you want to talk more about my growth story too? Because I don't know if I talked about that. Yeah,
that's the next point. So
cool. Yeah.
Because that's related as well, right? Because you grew the company Lattice and so it's connected. So tell us how did you not outgrow with the company?
Yeah. The way I thought about my own personal kind of growth story with Lattice, I kind of separated into 4 different phases. And so the first was I call it my button clicking days. It was I'm the only marketer. And in that first phase, and this was each of these phases is about a year, I would say. And so that first phase where I'm the only marketer, it was how can I get really good at marketing, right? How can I do things on my laptop and drive leads and really understand at the ground level how marketing works, whether that's building a website, running ads. And these were all things that I had done to some extent and I had exposure to working at an agency, but there's something really tangible about actually clicking the buttons on your laptop and making marketing stuff happen. And that first year really forced me to get good at that. And it was also, what's SaaS? Because I didn't know what an MQL was. I didn't really know how SaaS business model works. I didn't know what it was like to really build kind of SaaS program from the ground up. And so, generally it comes down to a growth mindset. And I was just digesting as much information as I possibly could, like a fire hose from Twitter and YouTube and the SaaStr podcast and other podcasts. And I just researched things like crazy. Every time I hit a wall, whether it's how do I run a Facebook ad or what's the best way to run a Slack community or something, I would just research it like crazy. SEO, I'm pretty good at SEO now. And that's just because I, stalked a lot of people who out there were good at SEO. I experimented with different tools. I asked questions when I had the chance to work with people. And so that was kind of the first year was really growth mindset, really getting good at marketing. The second year was evolving from just me to a player coach, right? And I was okay, I'm pretty good at this now. How can I slowly build a team around me to kind of help take some of the load off me? And I started to hire a content person and an event person, and we started to fill it out. The third phase, though, was where it started to get a little more uncomfortable for me. It was moving from a player coach to a professional manager. Right? I had to get really good at managing people. And the way I kind of figured that out was really having mentors, Lattice and outside. So, Jack was really, the CEO was really helpful at teaching me company building about SaaS, always pushing and prodding me to kind of get better around organizational design and hiring and things like that. And then Zach, who is the COO, really taught me how to be a good manager, how to have really difficult conversations around compensation and things like that. And this just comes with experience and talking and getting put into really tough management experience. And each one of these phases, I kind of had to change my mindset, right? I had to go from, all right, Alex, you're going to do all the work in phase 1 to phase 2 and 3. It's you can't do all of the work anymore. You need to hire people who are better than you and get good at managing people. And then phase 4 was how can I actually become an exec? How am I a manager of managers? And that becomes less about being a maybe directly good manager. It's how can you influence a team? how can you become a true leader and set a tone for a team and a department? How can I influence like managers who are then going to go influence their team? And to do that transition, I actually hired a coach. I hired a guy, Francois Dufour, who was the ex-CMO of Twilio. And that really helped me professionalize myself. How do I work with execs? How do I work with managers of managers? How do I work with it, do a board meeting and things like that? So yeah, that's kind of how I thought about my 4 stages. And it was really uncomfortable, to be honest. Like it was a difficult time in my life, but I really enjoyed, the challenge, or at least it was rewarding looking back on it.
Interesting. That makes me shamelessly plug my podcast sponsor because they are a growth mentor platform. And I actually found my coach there as well, Andrew Kaplan, who kind of coaches me on like growth stuff. And I think having mentors is like kind of a hack to quickly figure things out and move on instead of doing all the hard work and trying to with the trial and error and making mistakes. So to check out Growth Mentor. And Alex, I definitely think you should be there as a mentor as well, just for the purpose. I think like this, I'm pretty sure so many people would be like, so not just read your blogs, but actually like talk to you on there would definitely be interesting. Which takes me to you want to say something?
Yeah, just one other thing. Like, I think honestly, the only way that I was able to earn my right to like keep scaling was hiring people better than me too. Like I hired Annette to run the media company side of things, Charlie to do demand gen, Aaron was amazing at events, and a variety of other people. And that, like, the board loves that. The exec team loves that, right? Like, you need to kind of professionalize. It becomes about team building. Like the CMO who came after me at Lattice, like that was his core focus of how do you build the right organization and the right team? And you can see as a company scales, that's what it becomes about. It is not necessarily like how do you hack like Google ads and things like that. It is how do you build this amazing team? And so, yeah, that was like the central piece that showed me that I could scale.
Which leads to me to a question, like, didn't people who are better than you question your authority? Like, this guy actually knows less than me and I can actually manage a team better. And I have come across this as a problem. So I just want to understand from your perspective.
It's uncomfortable. And for a long time at Lattice, I was not always the highest paid person on the marketing team. I would hire people who I paid more than myself, which is a funny dynamic, right? I think what you learn is you become, like, as the VP of marketing, you kind of have this like global domain expert around both the product marketing and how to position things and the strategy. And so you might be able to hire people who know more about content than you or know more about demand gen than you, but you sort of know more about like the company strategy, the product positioning, where you're going, and that becomes kind of like a nice counterbalance. And so they maybe are sort of like functional experts, but you know a little bit more about like performance management and how to position things. And that gives you like a head start over them. But a lot of it's also just building trust and giving them autonomy to do what they think is right. And so I was not like a micromanager and saying, you should do this or you should do that. It was like, you come to me with your strategic plans and you treat people like an adult, and then you have a real conversation there. Yeah, I don't know. Those are some ways that you can kind of work with people better than me. And then also Lattice, like as a whole, right? I'd be lying. Like, people also wanted to join because they would meet with Jayzak or meet with Jack or meet with Deanie and some of the other people and say, okay, maybe Alex is a younger VP, but he has a really good support network around him, and the company is on to something really interesting. So,
yeah, okay. But the question remains in terms of managing is also about managing up. Sure, they were great people. They were very cooperative. They trusted you. They must have this thought, hey, Alex is a little bit young. Maybe we should have somebody more experienced who can actually manage the team. And since they hired a CMO, eventually that must be the reasoning as well. So I'm not sure if you're comfortable sharing with you, but I'd love to know, like, how do you actually manage up?
How did they manage up to me, or how did I?
How did you manage up
to Jack? Yeah. Yeah. I would show my thinking like crazy. So I would basically be explaining all the different elements of the marketing program. I would take people along for the ride, right? And so, I would show what I'm doing, what I'm building. And look, there was a moment like 2 years into Lattice where me and Jack were kind of like, he's like, are you the guy? Like, are you the one who's going to sort of take this into that next level? And he was like, not so sure. But I was like, look, Jack, look at the numbers. Like, this thing has been going like crazy. It is because of the things that I have been doing. I deserve a chance. And the compromise was the coach, right? And we went out and we got Francois to help me, and that sort of showed me what I like didn't know, if you will, and like taught me some certain things. But it also gave me more confidence in myself. I started to slowly realize that like I actually really knew what I was doing, even if I didn't have a lot of that kind of professional training and things like that. And so, yeah, the coach was kind of the compromise, if you will, to sort of help me scale. But I also left Lattice on my own terms. I wanted to go start a company, Doc. I think I could still be there. I think I could have been a CMO through the IPO. I would have definitely had to gone through another like learning journey and step up myself yet again. But, you know, I had always wanted to start a company, and that's kind of why I left. I wasn't ready for me, it wasn't as fun to kind of be like the CMO of a 50 or 100 person marketing team. It's funny, I spent most of my career in marketing. I didn't want to just be a marketer the rest of my life. I like building businesses and companies. And so that's what really attracted me. Marketing is sort of just my way into that. So that's what I'm excited about with Doc now.
Did you have this feeling when you're talking to the ex-CMO of Twilio that, hey, what I'm doing is actually, he's telling me exactly the same thing. There's nothing new I know. He's just reassuring me that what I'm doing is actually the thing that I should be doing. And
yes,
you know what I mean? Because everybody's winging it at some point, and like they're also figuring it out. Nobody knows more business more than you, customers more than you, positioning more than you.
Yeah. I think I learned that I actually knew what I was doing, and I was actually learned that I was a pretty good creative marketer. And the things that I didn't know, that made me actually even a better marketer, or like start in the wrong order, but that actually ended up being sort of beautiful accidents. And I just knew, I think my superpower, if you will, is I know things at a high level and super granular. And so I can get into a Google AdWords campaign and set it all up and like understand those tactics, and then step back out and do the strategy. And I think there's not to be arrogant, but there's not many marketing people who can do that. Now, where the coach was super helpful, and where I was very much my blind spot, is a lot of like the internal politics as a company grows. And not politics may be the wrong word, but how do you work and build an organization and a company? That was something I had not a lot, like I thought I knew, but I didn't really know. And so, you know, an example of that is, how do I partner with the sales team? How do I partner with the product team? How do I do a board meeting properly? Things like that. Were extremely helpful. We're talking to Francois, and also just bouncing all these ideas off him to make sure I wasn't going crazy.
Did you ever think yourself that you are a better manager or better IC? And how did you fix that in your head?
I mean, I don't think I'm that great of a manager. I think I'm a decent enough manager. I think maybe a mistake I would make early on, I guess your question was let me restart. I think your question of whether IC or manager, I'm like a cross between. I don't know. I think I enjoy being an IC more at times. I think I get a lot of fun building things myself and like really getting in the weeds and playing in Figma and building in Webflow. But there are benefits of being a manager. It's really fun and rewarding to watch people grow in front of you and to coach. And you also get a lot more scale. Like, you get to do a lot more things. But there's a lot of really uncomfortable, not fun parts about management. You know, those really tough, uncomfortable conversations when people aren't performing well. So I don't know. I think I'm still getting better as a manager. And it's like, you know, the things that are most uncomfortable are where you grow the most, right? And I think with the management side of things, I really had to push myself. But look, I think I'm able to figure it out. I think most of my team at Lattice really liked working with me, and I was able to kind of scale not just to managing a small team, but it ended up growing to like a 15 plus person marketing team. So must have did something okay.
Cool. Which leads me to the last story, and I want to make a complete separate story out of it. So yeah, how did you get into doc.us? It was a sales kind of a product, and is it still doc.us, right?
Yeah, which is called Doc, but the website's doc.us. Yeah.
Yeah, because I just want to make people go to the right platform. I definitely see that the angle that you're taking, the approach, the positioning that you're taking. How did you end up getting something like this in your head, where you're not a salesperson, rather a marketer, and came up with this idea?
So Lattice's growth story was really about moving up market, right? And so Lattice was started the business selling to SMBs. You can think of like startups like Lattice. And that's where we kind of started. But then as we were sort of growing the company, we were trying to sell to bigger and bigger companies, mid-market enterprise companies. And that became the core focus of marketing. It wasn't about attracting a lot of new signups necessarily. It was about how do we kind of position ourselves properly to these bigger and bigger companies. And it's something I worked a lot with Dini Mehta, who's the CRO at Lattice, and the sales team. And in that journey, I kind of came up with this idea of like a partnership portal where it was like, let's put all of our marketing collateral in one single place that really helps to tell the Lattice story completely, right? Like our product information, our case studies, our ROI analysis, all the different things. And then that became this nice little package that a champion could then go share to explain Lattice across the rest of their organization, right? Because these big enterprise sales, the big difference between SMB and enterprise is the size of the buying team. In an SMB, it's like one person you need to convince, just your champion. At an enterprise, it's a much bigger company, a lot of people. And so giving your champion a kind of asset that they could use to go convince other people became really valuable. And so long story short, I actually built a prototype with Luke, who is our brand designer and now my co-founder at Doc, in Webflow that basically built this partnership portal. And this was like 2-3 years ago. Gave it to the sales team and then kind of forgot about it. Like they were using it, but I wasn't really maintaining it. It was kind of a janky product. And then I looked back kind of in COVID last year, or like the first year of COVID, when I had a little bit more free time on my hands. And I was like, oh shit, this is really growing like crazy. Like they've made like 600 of these partner portals and they've been sharing it like nuts for a pretty kind of janky, prototype that they were doing. And so I was like, all right, there's something here. I always wanted to start a company. I had been at Lattice for about 5 years. So I was like, okay, maybe now is the time. So I started scheming a little bit more on the side with Luke, and then met up with Victor, who was an early Lattice engineer, to actually go pursue this full time. So yeah, we've been coding Doc for about a year now. It's been in beta for about 6 months. And the idea with Doc is it's a collaborative workspace for you and anyone outside of your company, but mainly prospects and customers. And it's pretty similar to the partner portal, except a lot fancier, a lot better, where you can put all your marketing and sales collateral in there. We give you access to different project planning tools. We track everything with analytics. There's commenting. And so, we really want to be the single destination that company works with their prospects and customers and help people go through that full customer lifecycle. Because most sales reps, right, will send over their demo follow-up email with a bunch of links and attachments. And it's like, instead of that, there can be a much better way. You can just send over your doc link that hosts everything really beautiful. And then you kind of, get all the analytics and then, really help your champion tell that story internally.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One thing I'm thinking in terms of while you were launching the startup, I'm like sales. So I'm a sales guy by trade. I started my career as a sales guy. And I feel like sales tech is getting so hard for SEO, for content marketing. The only company that stood out to me was Gong because they were actually doing the thought leadership really well. And now I still think your persona would be salespeople, people who are like, if I'm correct, right?
It is an interesting debate. I think we are building a horizontal product where it is not just salespeople, it's sales, customer success, founders, agencies. And so sales is one of our...
What's the primary persona?
Sales to start, but...
Yeah. So let's talk about sales, right? It's so hard to rank on SEO. There's no one podcast, or I can even count 100 podcasts that are really doing good in sales tech. The CPC is too high. The thought leadership is there. How do you actually go build a brand in sales tech today?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, sales and MarTech is super overcrowded and there is so much noise. And a lot of people have been burned in the past by different solutions that promised the world and never delivered. And so I think step one is just building a product that people actually love and is actually useful to a salesperson. I think one thing I have really learned over the last year in sort of customer development is Doc needs to be so stupidly simple for a salesperson to use because they are so phenomenally busy in their day. And so we are moving, originally I thought, they'll want to go into Doc, build these little spaces themselves. It'll be fun. They'll be more of a creator, but I was putting more of the marketing product design brain on top of a salesperson. When in reality, a salesperson wants it to sort of just happen automatically and more magically in the background and be an asset that really just helps alongside a sale. They're not really willing to put in that work all the time into your product and setting it up. And so, yeah, building a product that feels magical. And for Doc, that answer will be automation. And so how do we automatically generate these spaces? So it starts with this like really differentiated product, building that experience. I think taking just like a step from the product is building a product that helps grow itself. And so building products that have some element of virality among sales teams, salespeople, prospects, things like that. Calendly, calendar links are, a perfect example of that, right? Each time you see it, you see, oh, that's a cool product and you want to check it out yourself. So good product experience that helps grow itself. And then I think what you can do is layer on top of that some of the more traditional marketing channels. And you're right, it is really crowded to stand out. But I believe if you put really strong content out there, both from an SEO kind of guide level, but also more thought leadership when it comes to like the media company ideas that we've talked about, there's a chance, right? There's a chance you can kind of stand out there in the world. Like if Gong did it, I think we can do it with Doc as well. And yeah, it'll definitely be an uphill battle. But what I've found, and there's companies like Scratchpad who have done this really well, is if you can kind of create a magical product experience for the reps themselves, it'll really start growing virally.
Got it. That's what you're banking on. Cool, man. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. So just before finishing, where should people reach out to you? And this is the time where you can tell people.
Yeah. Follow me on Twitter at Kracov, Kracov. Go check out doc.us is the website. And yeah, those are the best places. Oh, and my blog, kracov.co.
Oh yeah, the blog is amazing, by the way. I get occasional emails and I love it because it's very thoughtful. Although it's not long, it's just to the point to just tell you the right insights.
This is Growth Marketing Story with your host, and he goes by Azashai. Come learn from the mindset of growth marketers. This is Growth Marketing Story with your host.